People ask me about making farmer's cheese all of the time, so let's do it. Why do we want to make homemade farmer's cheese? Well, if you're following the specific carbohydrate diet, SCD diet or GAPS diet, you will see that this cheese is mentioned throughout the book. Dry curd cottage cheese and farmer's cheese. It's part of the intro diet in the book. It's mentioned in many recipes. It's brought up a lot, but it's hard to find. I get a lot of people asking, well, can I just make my own? Which I have never done because I didn't used to have trouble finding it until a couple of years ago. And now it is not the SCD version, the SCD kind that is properly made is not available in my area any longer. There are actually a lot of recipes for farmer's cheese online, but here is what a lot of people miss about this, and those are not SCD-legal. Just because it says farmer's cheese does not make it okay for specific carbohydrate diet. So the cheese that I'm making here, is fermented properly and made so that it can be SCD legal. So I'm going to show you what I did. I like to usually do these videos kind of live, but in this case, we're going to have to jump into some different processes because this was hard to do. And my first attempt was an utter total failure. But I learned a lot, so let's start to go through it. What I learned on my first batch is that I fermented the milk at too high of a temperature. So I did it in my Instant Pot, which fermented about, mine when I've taken the temperature is about 108 to 110 degrees. It's supposed to be between 100 and like 112 degrees. That is a little bit too hot. That started to denature the proteins in the milk, so it would not curdle. And that is one thing. So you have to use milk that is not ultra pasteurized to get the curds, and it can't be boiled ahead of time like we do for yogurt, because just like with the butter in my previous video, that is going to denature the proteins. We will not get what we need out of it to make the cheese, just like we couldn't get the butter. So, but with butter, I could use grass-fed. That worked fine, but with cheese, since we're heating it up, it was just not gonna work. Grass-fed is fine, but ultra pasteurized was not okay, and I could not find grass-fed that wasn't ultra pasteurized around me. So I'm just using regular pasteurized milk. So attempt 2. This is where things get good. So I fermented in my Luvele at 94 degrees, which is the lowest temperature you could get the SCD fermentation to get rid of all the lactose at 24 hours. And it didn't denature the proteins. At least I was able to start getting some curds. So let's check that out. Our farmer's cheese has a very similar start to making yogurt, except for boiling the milk first. I've got my half cup of yogurt starter. I've got a half gallon of just regular pasteurized milk. I'm going to do my little mix to get it smooth. And then I'm just going to whisk this together before I combine the whole thing in my Luvele here. Add my mixture, add the rest of my milk, and then I'm just going to set the temperature and the time. So we can let that ferment for 24 hours at 94 degrees. Adding water to the Luvele as you need to do, and then we are ready to go. And what's the difference between dry curd cottage cheese and farmer's cheese? Not really much of anything. It's just that dry curd cottage cheese, I used to be able to find it in bags, and the curds are all separate, but they're dry. All the whey has been dried off. Farmer's cheese is basically the same thing, but the curds have been pressed, so it makes more of a brick. That's really basically the whole difference. Both of them have had the whey taken away, which removes most of the lactose. But the other thing with the SCD version is that we are fermenting it to ensure that it is virtually lactose free. My milk is done fermenting, so we're going to take it out of the yogurt maker, and then we are going to just go straight into our pot so that we can heat up, so hopefully we'll get the curd separation. I'm going to put this into my pot. So it's kind of like it looks kind of like kefir. It's a little bit, it's yogurty. It's kind of like a yogurt drink. And then I'm going to heat this. I have to move it to my back burner, which is a simmering burner. My other burners burn too hot. So I got to have it on the back burner to keep that temperature a little bit lower, because when I tried this before, it just got too hot. So putting the heat on, we're going to heat it up to between 110 and 120 degrees. And then I've got my spoon ready, but you don't want to stir it too much, because you don't want to keep the constant motion will also stop the curds from forming. So I'm going to see, I may need to add a little lemon juice to it to help it, but we're going to get it up to temperature first and see how it's doing. While it's heating up, I'm just going to stir it every once in a while to keep the temperature even, so it's not real cold in the middle. Once it gets up to the temperature, we want to stop stirring to let the curds form. I just took the temperature. It's about 95 degrees or so, and I just want to show, if I can get it on the camera, that yeah, there are some light curds starting to form. That's what we want. So it's a very slow process. You gotta be patient, because you can't have the heat too high. So I have it on low on my back burner, and I'm just gonna let it keep going. I'm just stirring every several minutes at this point. At this temperature, I'm only stirring about every 7 or 8 minutes or so. And the reason we don't want to stir too much is that the curds are very, very soft and fragile, and so stirring them will break them. We need these proteins to clump together to form the curds. So too much motion is going to stop that from happening. Another thing I want to show you as this is getting warmer, it's probably going to start to get warmer a little faster, is that you see how there is some water there. So that's whey. It's whey. There's no lactose in it because we did the ferment, but it's the liquid from the fermented milk, and it's separating there. That's exactly what we want to see starting to happen. And we're at about 100 degrees right about this time, so everything seems to be coming along as it should be. So at this point that we're seeing this separation, it's mostly in this corner, probably because that's where I was disturbing it a little bit. We don't want to plunge our thermometer into the middle or stir it. We do want to kind of keep track of our temperature, so I'm just going to slide it on the corner here. So 110, that's about where I want to keep it. I may have to lift it up from the heat a little bit, just to keep, I don't want it to get too hot. I don't want it to get over about 125 or so. But I'd like to keep it as close to this as I can. This should hopefully only take about 15 minutes or so more, but we'll see. All right, this has been holding steady at about 112 for about 10 minutes, between 10 and 15 minutes. I'm getting some separation, but not as much as I'd like. So I'm just going to turn up the heat a tiny bit and try to get it up to about 115 to 118. See if that forces the proteins to start curdling more. And again, do not be tempted to stir this. You guys got to let those curds form, and stirring it, that could break them. So we're just going to keep going. What I'm doing right now is holding this temperature between 120 and 122, checking it very carefully in the corners every few minutes, and it's about 120, 121. But I did take it off the heat. I'm just going to let it sit here. I have the timer set for 10 minutes. If I don't see a full curdle in 10 minutes, I will move on to my next step to try. I'm getting some separation here, quite a bit, but not where I need it to be. So I'm just going to add, it might not be acidic enough, so I'm just going to add 1 teaspoon of lemon juice to it and see if that gets it to finish off the process. I'm going to add my lemon juice into the corner that had like the most separation. I am not going to stir it though. I'm still not going to stir it. Well, still not much luck. I got separation there and kind of around the edges, but not in the middle. So we're going to try one more time to heat this up to about 125 degrees and let it sit and see if that works. If it doesn't, I'm going to have to call this one a fail. All right, I'm just going to cool this a little bit. You can see there is a lot of separation underneath. So I'm just going to see what happens when I strain it. I have let this cool all the way to room temperature. What I had hoped for was to see curds separate and rise to the top. I've got a lot of separation, so I'm just going to pour it into a strainer and we're going to see what we get. I'm not going to lie, I was extremely frustrated at this point, which is where I started adding the lemon juice. But you didn't, I think this would have turned out exactly the same without the lemon juice. So I was just trying to get those curds. And I realized that it was separating to the point where I was going to be able to strain it, which I did. You could pour it into cheesecloth. I want to use my yogurt strainer so that I can continue to strain it, but it's gonna has a lot of liquid. Oh. So there's a lot of liquid, but I've got a lot left in there, so I might have to use the cheesecloth after all. Okay, hold on, change around. All right, so first this is pretty liquidy, but it like kind of stayed in there more than I thought, so the rest is going to go into cheesecloth. All right, I've got this straining in my 2 containers here. So there's quite a bit more curd than I thought there was going to be, so I'm going to be curious to see how this turns out. But what I'm most encouraged by is that the whey is, just that yellowish clear. It's not milky white, which means that it's straining the way it should be. So we'll see tomorrow how this looks. It is the next day, and these have been dripping all night. Not quite 24 hours yet, but just about. You can see that. You can see how much has gone down there. There's a little bit of a line where it used to be. And it's quite thick. This came out really nice, actually. I'm pretty happy. You can see how thick this is. So this strains pretty well. I have my farmer's cheese here straining. It's been straining for about 72 hours. Just because I wanted to see how thick I could get it. There's still a little tiny bit of liquid, but I think we're pretty much done. You don't have to go this far. At 24 hours, it was great. Especially if you want something that's kind of soft, like a cream cheese or ricotta. But see, you can see this is pretty solid. So I'm going to take it out of this container, and then we're going to see how it is, and then we're going to try some. Here we have our full amount. I was trying to make it look pretty, but it kind of scooped out of my container. It was kind of hard to make it look nice. If you have one of the kinds with the press, I'm sure you can get like a nice block, but this is good. I'm going to put it in another kind of container to store it, but I just wanted to get kind of the full visual. So you can see it kind of looks a little like dripped yogurt. It is thicker, much more stiff and dense than just regular dripped yogurt, even yogurt dripped for as long as I did it here, which was about 3 days. So I'm going to show you a comparison to another kind of farmer's cheese. This is the Lifeway farmer's cheese, which if you're on a specific carbohydrate diet, it's not a part of that diet. It's not legal for SCD because it still has a lot of lactose in it. Not a lot of lactose, but it still has beyond the limit of lactose for SCD diet. So you can see it's actually not, you can see a little bit more curd. It's actually fairly, it's got some liquid to it. So basically it's actually a little bit softer than mine even. Let me get mine back over here. Here is this. You can see there's a little more, it's got a little more of the cottage cheese look. And then this is more, it looks a little bit more like yogurt. So they're about the same amount of softness, very similar. So you're probably wondering, how is mine different than yogurt? And I will show you here in a second with the taste test. Okay, so we're gonna take a little off here. So it's not really sliceable. It's kind of, you can kind of slice it a little bit. So we're just gonna put some in so we can try it. I wish I could show you the Friendship Dairies, which is an SCD-legal farmer's cheese. It's just that I can't find it in my area. That's why I wanted to make this. So now that we've gone through the process, let's go ahead and try it, and then I can talk a little bit more about farmer's cheese and the specific carbohydrate diet. All right, homemade farmer's cheese. I really like this a lot. So it's not as tart as yogurt. So if you're wondering, does it taste the same as dripped yogurt because it kind of looks like it? No, it definitely has a very different flavor than dripped yogurt, which I just made some, so I'm very fresh in having my dripped yogurt. And of course I eat yogurt all the time anyway. The dripped yogurt is way more tart than this cheese. And this cheese has just a little more body to it, because I didn't get as big of curds as like the farmer's cheese that you buy in a store, but there's a little bit of the curd to it, which just gives it a different texture than just the yogurt is more cream cheese like. But this is a little bit cream cheese like in the flavor, which I really like. I think it will be great for making a cheesecake. I'm also going to try my bagels, my grain-free SCD bagels that I make using farmer's cheese. I'm going to try making that with it too. But the flavor is really rich. It's a little bit tart. It's maybe a little bit more tart than the store-bought farmer's cheese, but it is definitely not as tart as yogurt, which gives it a different experience. So the plus side of this cheese is that you can make a soft cheese that is SCD legal, which is usually not hard. You can't have cream cheese, and you can't have some ricotta and some other soft cheeses. You can't have fresh mozzarella. This isn't mozzarella-like, but it is a little more like a ricotta and a cream cheese. So in that respect, it's really good. I really like it a lot. Would I make this again? Possibly. If you want kind of something a little special and you have the patience for it, I would say it's kind of worth giving it a try if you're very curious about it, but patience is key, as you saw in my making of process. It was very difficult. Once I kind of knew that I wasn't going to get the curds that I thought I was going to get, then it was a little easier. I just kept thinking it was going wrong. But really, I got what I could get given the process that was available to me, which is, putting putting it in a pot on the stove and trying to keep the right temperature. So it came out. I didn't think it was going to come out, and I got something very, very, very nice tasting, very nice texture. I like it a lot. It's not just yogurt, which was which was my goal in making this. But given the difficulty, I would say for most purposes, if you're on a SCD diet, is that dripping your yogurt is going to suit your purposes. This would be kind of something special. Like I might do it again if I have a special thing I want to make, like a cheesecake that's just a little richer than you can get with just the yogurt. The picture that I have for the thumbnail here for this video, I had made like a little cheese. You can make it in a cheese ball. I made kind of a little cheese patty, I guess you could say, that you could use like for a dip. You could make dips with it. So you could get a very different tasty recipes, dips, spreads with this, if that's something you would like. But I just want to be clear that even though Breaking the Vicious Cycle mentions farmer's cheese or dry curd cottage cheese a lot, that's because it was much easier to get. When I first started SCD diet 25 years ago, I could find dry curd cottage cheese like in just the grocery store. For then farmer's cheese, I was able to find that all the time until about 3 years ago or so. I had no trouble finding farmer's cheese. Now, the farmer's cheese that I find in the store, like the Lifeway I showed you in the comparison, that is not part of SCD diet, unfortunately. So it's very difficult to find. I don't want people feel like they have to have it. And if you're following an SCD diet, you do not have to have it. You can have everything else. You can make your yogurt and drip it. It's so prominent in the book because it was easy to find, and it was kind of you can make different things with it. And so it was like, oh, that's convenient, but it's not convenient anymore. So that's my verdict on it. Make again? Possibly. If you're not really into cooking, I'm gonna say that's probably a no for you. If you're not into standing over the stove and making things, don't even worry about it. Are you going to try to make farmer's cheese? Or have you made it? Maybe you had different results. Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear if you had different results, better results, worse results. Tell me, let me know. I'd love to hear. And I hope you enjoyed that video on making SCD legal farmer's cheese, and I will see you in the next one.